Secrets of the Timber Estate, The Diary of Eleanor Berger by Candace Clorinda. This book is dedicated to the author who shall not be named. As a child, your story of a boy who lived filled my childhood with magic and made me want to become a writer. Your actions in my adulthood killed my childhood and prompted me to rekindle that dream in order to write a story featuring a boy who dies just for being who he is. Note to the reader. Dearest reader, I want to thank you for picking up a copy of my book. I also want to thank you for taking the time to read it. I hope it sits fondly on your shelf next to your favorite books, and that when you see it there with all of the books that have helped you through your darkest moments, that you will smile. This story is my love letter to the people who have gone through abuse. This is also my love letter to the entire Alphabet Mafia. I know we have taken a beating. I know that the current climate for us, especially our trans siblings, is not a welcoming one. I write this story for you. I write this story so that you know that you are not alone and that you are loved. Do not let hateful people try to put you in boxes and invalidate your existence. All my love, Candace Clorinda. Trigger warning: emotional abuse, major; dead naming, mild; and transphobic themes, moderate. August 15th. 2023. Dear Diary, I found out today that the monster who gave birth to me has suddenly died in a car crash, making me the new caretaker of Timber Estate, a job which I'm honestly not happy about. I spent years working to make a name for myself. I even reclaimed the Berger last name to distance myself from the villain who gave birth to me, and now I'm going to have to leave it all behind. Tomorrow I have to leave the picket line of the writers and actors strike and make my way to the Timber Estate, which I haven't been to in 7 blissful years. I left to get away from my overbearing, emotionally and financially abusive mother. Now that she has died, I'm going back to take my destined place in this world. My only consolation is that Molly, by some miracle, was an organ donor. Ironically, her death will be the first selfless thing she ever did. Her death will save the lives of several people on the transplant list. The doctors asked if I wanted to say goodbye before they harvested her organs, but I told them that she would have wanted to save those people right away and that she would have wanted to donate her body to science to help more people. I figured that if she was going to be a villain in life, the least she could do was be a hero in death. I am not looking forward to returning to the Timber Estate, but what else can I do? I am the last of my line, the last of the people in this world that are legally allotted the privilege of taking care of the property. The property was built in 1882 by James Timber and his bride Elizabeth after moving to Washington State to pursue a career in the lumber industry. Shortly after the estate was finished, James hired my great-great-great-grandparents, Ingrid and Eric. The passing of my birth person, Molly, officially and legally makes me the 6th generation to take up the mantle of caretaker. If I'm going to be honest, I feel so angry. I already wasted so much of my time because of that monster, and now I will have to leave the life that I built for myself behind because of her death. I feel bad leaving the rest of the actors and writers behind on the picket line, but I am the only one left to take care of the property. It honestly wouldn't be so bad if the Timber Estate wasn't so haunted. All my love, Eleanor. August 16th, 2023. Dear Diary, stepping onto the Timber Estate was like stepping back into my childhood. No matter how much the world changes around it, the Timber Estate stays the same. The Queen Anne Victorian-style home with its iron fence, beautiful wraparound porch, and large ornate wooden door is a relic lost to time. I took a moment to admire the 4 sturdy apple trees a little ways outside of the 4 corners of the iron fence before I approached the cobblestone walkway. I had hoped that the ghost of the Timber Estate would at least give me a day or 2 to settle in and grieve over the loss of the life I've built for myself before they made their presence known, but the dead very seldom get visitors, and they hadn't seen me for 7 years, so I honestly shouldn't have been that surprised. It was Elizabeth first, because of course it was. Elizabeth, wife of James, first mistress of the Timber Estate, mother of John, David, and Lucy. Elizabeth had married James when she was 18 years old and James was 24. James was already a very well-off man at the time. However, it would be another year before the estate was finished and the couple would move in. Until that time, they honeymooned in Niagara Falls for several weeks, and then, being the socialites of the time, they spent several weeks with one friend or another. They often attended parties and showered their hosts with gifts and good company. So of course it was Elizabeth who made her presence known first. I had spent most of my life pretending I didn't see the ghosts, that I couldn't hear them, that they were not there, and that they never had been there. All except for Gertrude, the youngest, and growing up, my favorite of all the ghosts. I mostly ignored them because my mother hated the ghost and screamed at them often. It was better to pretend that they weren't there than risk getting screamed at with them. When I left the estate, I tried to forget about the ghosts. I even tried to convince myself that they were all just figments of my imagination, nothing more than imaginary friends of a very lonely child with no siblings or friends to play with. I had even almost convinced myself a few times. Maybe my mother and I were having shared delusions from years of living on the large empty estate. Maybe we were both so lonely after my father left us that we pretended that our dead relatives and the dead Timber family still resided on the estate. Maybe I was so heartbroken after Grandma Sophia died that I made it all up to deal with her death. Maybe we were just flat out crazy from the start. I never saw ghosts anywhere else, just on the Timber estate, so maybe it all was just an elaborate delusion caused by an electromagnetic field or ley lines. I almost had convinced myself that it was all in my head so many times, but there was Elizabeth again, greeting me like she always did, scolding me for being away for so long, forcing me to face the truth. That everyone who dies on the Timber estate is forever tied to it. And that is just how the ghostly residents preferred it. It wasn't long after I finally stepped through the ornate threshold and into the beautiful entry room of the house that James decided to say hello, and that he was so happy that I was taking up the mantle of caretaker of the Timber estate. He spent half an hour chatting away about how happy he was to see the great-great-great-granddaughter of Eric and Ingrid back on the grounds, asked if I had found myself a beau yet, and he, too, scolded me for staying away for so long, exclaiming that it wasn't right that I had not come to visit them before now, and that it was rude of me to have stayed away during the holidays for all of these years, stating that Christmas hadn't been the same without me. This didn't surprise me, considering that the ghosts love to put on their own production of A Christmas Carol every year, utilizing the ballroom as their stage. It was no surprise to hear that Christmas wasn't the same, as it was the only time I felt like I could acknowledge the ghost's existence without being screamed at, and I only dared to acknowledge them for the performance. I had been the only audience that they have had since my father left and my Grandma Sophia died, making her the newest member of the cast. These were conversations that I was not ready or willing to have. I am not proud to report that I eventually blew up on both of them, screaming that I have a headache, I just left the life I had built for myself behind for them, and that I just wanted to lay down and get settled in. It was at that point that both James and Elizabeth got very upset and told me to mind my tone. However, they decided to leave me alone to unpack. I grabbed my bags and went to my old room, threw myself on the bed, and started crying. Not because I'm sad that the woman who gave birth to me is dead, because if I'm going to be honest, I'm not really sad about that. I started crying because I hoped that if any of the ghosts had come to greet me when I got there, it would have been my Grandma Sophia, as she was the woman who raised me and loved me, considering that my mother was incapable of doing so. Maybe she's as angry at me for leaving to get away from my mother and pursue a career in acting and writing as Elizabeth and James seem to be. I wouldn't blame her if she was angry at me. All my love, Eleanor. August 17th, 2023. Dear Diary, today I encountered Lucy, the very last ghost that I wanted to see. Lucy died in 1953 at the age of 64 of heart failure, outliving her son, but not her husband Oliver, who died in 1955 at the age of 69 of cirrhosis of the liver. Lucy is the bigoted daughter of James and Elizabeth. She is also one of the reasons that I couldn't come out of the closet as bisexual until after I left the Timber estate. This loud and obnoxious ghost has spent her entire afterlife bad-mouthing and dead-naming her son, Edgar. Edgar stays mostly to himself. I've tried to talk to Edgar a few times over the years, but as much as I had tried to pretend that the other ghosts didn't exist, Edgar has pretending that both the ghost and the living don't exist since long before my grandparents were born. It's sad because every other member of the Timber and Berger families have accepted Edgar for who he is. Nobody else dead names him or blames him for the Timber family line ending. Only Lucy. This has caused a lot of turmoil for the ghosts. Apparently, Lucy and my great-great-grandmother Freydis were extremely close when they were alive, up until Edgar's death. Now Freydis avoids Lucy like the plague, and considering they lived through the Spanish influenza outbreak, that is saying something. Over the years, Lucy has exclaimed everything from, why couldn't she be left-handed? I could accept it if Esther was left-handed, but parading around in trousers and binding her breasts? Her actions ended our family bloodline. 2, it's just not right or natural. A woman is a woman. She can't be a man. It's just not right. All of which were met with corrections of, Edgar, for the love of God, woman, our child's name is Edgar, from Oliver, and we are ghosts. We are the supernatural, the paranormal. Do you really think you have the authority to be talking about what is or is not natural? He is my grandson, and he is a fine young man. From James. No matter how much turmoil Lucy has caused, or how many times she was corrected by her own family, or on occasion my family, she still persisted in her endless lament over her son Edgar, which in turn caused Edgar to withdraw from everyone, no matter how many times the rest of the household tried to include him. That is one thing I can say about the other ghosts of Timber Estate. They never gave up on Edgar. No matter how hard Edgar tried to withdraw, they still did everything in their power to include him and tried to help him understand that he is loved. I guess when your own mother spends her entire afterlife dead-naming you and blaming you for her entire family line ending, it's hard to accept that anyone could love you. Edgar deserves better, and I wish that Lucy would just get over herself already, accept her son, and stop causing unneeded drama. It's exhausting and so unnecessary. It's insane how much one loud, hateful voice can outshine an entire chorus of love and support. All my love, Eleanor. August 18th, 2023. Dear Diary, today I spent some time in the ballroom. I always loved the ballroom as a child. I would dance and pretend that I was Cinderella, or later on, after I found the Jane Austen novels in the library, Elizabeth Bennet, going to a magnificent ball. Today, I just sat in the middle of the floor and let the memories flood back to me, and then it hit me. A memory that I had long forgotten. I was around 23, it was right before I left the Timber Estate, and I was dancing around pretending to be Elizabeth Bennet when I spotted Edgar, watching me dance from the corner of the ballroom. He had a smile on his face, which was nice because I had never seen him smile before, and I noticed how his smile reached his eyes. I remembered asking him what he was smiling at, and he replied, Elizabeth Bennet, dancing at the Netherfield Ball. I think this was the first and only time I have ever heard Edgar speak. It was a lovely memory that I'm honestly quite sad that I had somehow forgotten about until today. After my time in the ballroom, I decided to go to the library to pick up that copy of Pride and Prejudice that I had spent my teenage years reading and rereading. As I ran my hands along the shelves, I found all of the novels of Jane Austen present and accounted for. However, where Pride and Prejudice should have been, there was instead a huge, ornate, leather-bound diary. I picked it up and opened the cover, which read, Property of Esther Timber, stamped in a gold leaf on the inside cover. At first I closed the diary and put it back on the shelf, not wanting to intrude Edgar's private thoughts. But the second that I started to walk away from the shelf, the book dropped onto the floor and opened up to the very first entry, which is as follows. June 10th, 1931. Dear Diary, today is my 15th birthday, and a diary is a perfectly acceptable gift for a 15-year-old girl. However, I don't feel like a 15-year-old girl. I feel like a boy. I've always felt like a boy. I've spent my whole life being made to play with dolls and wear fancy dresses and have ribbons in my long hair. I have had every advantage in this world, every privilege that can be afforded to a child who has parents of wealth and status, and yet I am unhappy. Thanks to some tragic mistake or cruel joke, I was given the body of a girl instead of a boy. The preacher says that God makes no mistakes, but I do not believe that this can be true because I have spent my whole life wanting to play in the mud, shoot rifles, and wear trousers like a boy, and instead I am forced to learn needlepoint and wear fancy dresses and have ribbons in my long hair. To make matters worse, I bled for the first time a fortnight ago, which was absolutely the worst experience of my life. I've been told by my mother that this is something that I'm going to have to go through every month until I am an old woman. I don't want to have to deal with this until I'm an old woman. I just want to be a boy, and I want to be called Edgar, not Esther. Sincerely, Edgar Timber. I feel so badly for Edgar. He knew all his life that he was a boy, and yet he was still forced to live so much of it as a girl. If that wasn't bad enough, he's had to spend his entire afterlife being belittled by his own mother. Edgar deserves better. All my love, Eleanor. August 19th, 2023. Dear Diary, after reading over half of Edgar's diary last night, I decided that I would search for Edgar this morning. But after searching nearly the entire Timber estate, I could not find any trace of him. The only place that I had not looked was the attic, so I grabbed a flashlight and made my way up the steps. There are a lot of things in the attic. There's an old crib that had once been in the nursery, boxes and trunks filled with old baby clothing and toys, all of the decorations for every holiday, but no Edgar. It wasn't until I was about to exit the attic that I heard a metal click and the creak of hinges as one of the trunks opened to reveal some old clothes. A few personal items, including a hairbrush, a mirror, and what appeared to be another diary, only this diary was older than Edgar's. It turned out that it wasn't a diary at all. It was a spell book with property of Ingrid Berger handwritten in the modern Latin alphabet on the first page, and the entire rest of the contents written in the English language, but using the Elder Futhark runic alphabet instead of the modern Latin alphabet. I will be spending the next few days transcribing the spellbook into the modern Latin alphabet. So far, I've only come across information on runes, divination, and a few small protection and prosperity spells. However, I'm hoping that there's a spell in the book that explains why those who die on the property never leave. If nothing more, it is another piece of the puzzle, even if it's leaving me with more questions than answers. At the very least, I wish I knew who was helping me put the pieces together. I know it's not the wind that knocked Edgar's heavy diary down or unlocked the trunk that revealed Ingrid's spellbook. Things were a lot less confusing a few days ago when this place was still in my past and I was standing on the picket line for my future and the future of all writers and actors. All my love, Eleanor. August 20th, 2023. Dear Diary, today I spent a good majority of the day in the kitchen. I wanted to make the oatmeal cookies that Grandma Sophia always made for me. I wanted to feel close to her as I was sad that I had not seen her yet. I got down all the ingredients and started mixing. Once the cookies were in the oven, the kitchen smelled like my childhood. I sat down with Grandma Sophia's cookbook and looked through the recipes, remembering how much she loved to cook and how she would sit me at the island and have me help her make meatballs or cookies or anything else to keep me away from my mother, who would spend her days in online chat rooms looking for a man in uniform to try and entrap, which is why my father left. For years before he left, my mother would sit in front of the computer looking for her next victim. Sometimes I would sit and play with my dolls in the computer room instead of the kitchen or old nursery, which were both places I could play dolls with Gertrude without Molly knowing, hoping that she would stop paying attention to the men on the other side of the screen and play with me. Sometimes she would ask me to stop playing with my dolls and have me sit on her lap. She would mute the mic and tell me what to say into it. Thinking this was a game of pretend and loving that my mother would spend any time with me at all, I would parrot back whatever she wanted me to say. It wasn't until I was much older that I realized that she was looking for a new husband and she was using me as bait to try to find a man who might want to start an instant family to come to her aid and save her from her quote-unquote boring and unfilling relationship with my father, and that I should have just stayed in the nursery or the kitchen where I could play with Gertrude, who was 8 years old when the Spanish influenza claimed her and her parents, Thornstein, son of Ingrid and Eric, as well as his wife, Emma. At the time, Gertrude was quite the anomaly, as Thornstein was white and Emma was a woman of color. Despite the fact that Emma and Thornstein could not legally marry, that did not stop Ingrid and Eric from performing the marriage rite for their son and his bride, nor did it stop Elizabeth and James from writing a wedding announcement that took up a whole page in the local newspaper and procuring an entire wedding feast for the couple and their families to celebrate this joyous occasion, which James and Elizabeth insisted take place on the grounds of Timber Estate. These acts firmly planted both the Timber and Berger families on the right side of history a little more than half a century before Martin Luther King Jr. made his I Have a Dream speech. When the Spanish influenza found the Timber estate, it hit harder than anyone could have expected. Emma, Thornstein, and Gertrude were among some of the first of thousands of people who did not pull through. Along with John, the oldest son of James and Elizabeth, 16-year-old Henry, who was the only child of David and Sarah Timber, Sarah was so heartbroken over her son's death that she lost her battle with the Spanish influenza only hours after her son and Albert, who was the husband of Freydis and father of Alice. The next year, in the winter of 1919, Elizabeth died from what was probably complications from the Spanish influenza, as she had contracted pneumonia, but her lungs had never fully recovered, so the already deadly infection claimed her quite quickly. A few months later, in the spring of 1920, James died from what his doctor called a broken heart. I don't blame my father for leaving. My mother was a nightmare, but I wish that he had taken me with him, or at the very least, I wish he had called once or twice after he left. Instead, all I got was a note that read, "Dear Eleanor, I love you more than words can say, but I need to leave. I need to find family and community somewhere else, somewhere that doesn't include your mother. You will always be my shining light. Love you so much, Daddy." I have very conflicting feelings about my father. My mother was a complete and total monster, and I know my father needed to get away from that, but I hate him for leaving me with her. I hate him for leaving me with Grandma Sophia, being the only person here with the ability to physically protect me, which she was only able to do until I was 17. It was in 2010, which was my junior year of high school. She was only 64 years old when she died. All of her organs shut down at once, and the doctors didn't know how or why it was happening, but there was no way that she was going to die in a hospital. Hospice was brought in, and she got to die in her own bedroom in the house that she loved, surrounded by everyone who loved her, and that left me mostly unprotected. After I pulled the cookies out of the oven, Grandma Sophia finally made her presence known. She was there, standing in the kitchen, leaning up against the island, as she had done so many times when she was alive. We talked about all of this and so much more. I have missed her so much. It was so nice to see her, to talk to her, to be there in the same room with her. It was never her fault that her daughter turned out to be a monster. The monster who gave birth to me liked to blame all her pain and suffering on my grandfather, Logan. She claimed it was all his fault for choosing his military career over my Grandma Sophia and her, his one and only child. But as much as she liked to throw around blame, I don't feel like I can blame him for being such a horrible person. I was left by my father, and I didn't turn out to be a monster incapable of love. All my love, Eleanor. August 21st, 2023. Dear Diary, I finished reading Edgar's diary today, and now more than ever, I wish that he would make his presence known so that I can talk to him. I keep replaying the one and only time he ever talked to me over and over in my head, and I think about how lonely he must be. His last entry in his diary was the saddest. He started the diary when he was 15, but due to the massive size of the diary and how infrequently he wrote in it, his very last entry was from the day he died at the age of 33, which is as follows. November 9th, 1948. Dear Diary, getting to live as my true self has been the most freeing experience of my life. The last few years have been the best of my life. I never expected Grandmother Elizabeth and Grandfather James to be so supportive, and Father as well. I just wish that Mother would be supportive. Every day, Mother roams the halls of the estate crying about how I'm ruining the family name and bringing shame upon the family. She keeps telling me that it is my responsibility as the last heir of the Timber estate to be a lady, get married to a gentleman, and have lots of babies so the family line can survive. I don't understand why I should have to. I'm sure that I will be able to find a way to adopt a child or two. I'm sure that there are plenty of orphanages that will part with a child or two for the right price. Once I find myself a bride, although I will not be able to legally marry her, we can adopt and create our own little family to continue the Timber line. There is no reason that I should have to live my life unauthentically just to have children and continue the family line. A family line should not have to continue with a biological child. I have been told since my infancy that we are all children of God, so would not any child that I adopt be my own? If we are all truly children of God, would that child not be family? I will find a way to keep the Timber name going, but for now, I need to be able to live my own authentic life. Sincerely, Edgar. I found this to be the saddest entry because he was so determined to be himself and have it all. But he was killed that very night in this very house just for being himself. He should have been able to have a full and happy life, but instead someone who was never caught and therefore never brought to justice took that from him. According to the news articles from a local paper, the murderer found his way onto the Timber estate and killed Edgar by choking him from behind. According to accounts from Elizabeth and James, who witnessed the murder, while the man was choking Edgar, he spoke into Edgar's ear about how he would single-handedly rid the world of all queer people, starting with Edgar. My heart aches for him. All my love, Eleanor. August 22nd, 2023. Dear Diary, the further I get into transcribing Ingrid's spell book, the more I think that there is nothing in there that's going to give me a clue as to why the people who die on this estate never leave. So far, it has all been pretty standard information. There are some condensed versions of the stories from the Poetic Edda, as well as a stanza-by-stanza Berger Havamal, which is a much more gender-neutral Havamal, translated into Ingrid's own words, plenty of information about runes and divination, several rites of passage, rituals, but nothing about why the people who die on this property stay on the property after death. I saw Edgar today for the first time since I came back to the Timber estate. I was in the ballroom, dancing around, pretending to be Elizabeth Bennet when I saw him. He was standing there, smiling like he had when I was 23 years old right before I left. And like before, I asked him what he was looking at, and he replied, Elizabeth Bennet, dancing at the Netherfield Ball. After that, we had a good conversation. I confessed to him that I read his entire diary and asked him if he was the one who dropped the diary on the floor and opened the chest in the attic. He informed me it was not him. I instantly felt awful for reading his diary. I felt like the worst person in the world, and it must have showed all over my face because it was moments later that he said, I would like to ask, what did you learn from my diary? I told him about how I learned that he had always felt like a boy, that he had tried very hard to have it all, and that his mother was the only person in the family that did not support him. A conversation quickly ensued, and before we knew it, we had been talking for nearly 2 hours. We talked a lot about awful mothers and our favorite books. It was an amazing conversation, and I hope that there will be many more to come. I hope that Edgar will keep ignoring his mother, but will open up to the other ghosts and finally embrace the love that they have for him. All my love, Eleanor. August 23rd, 2023. Dear Diary, today, I spent the day playing make-believe tea party with Gertrude, her parents, and an assortment of dolls in the old nursery. It was a nice and nostalgic distraction that I greatly felt like I needed. Sometimes I feel so sorry for Gertrude. She was so young when she died. She will never get any older. She will never have her first kiss, or fall in love, or get married. She will forever be an 8-year-old girl with a love of dolls. Gertrude doesn't seem to be sad about being an eternal child at all. She happily spends her days dancing around the Timber estate, playing with her dolls and enjoying being a child. She loves that she gets to dance and play every single day. She loves spending time with her parents, who happily spend hours every day playing imagined games with their daughter. They are a happy, loving family frozen in time. That should be all that matters, that they are together and they are happy. But when I think about all that she missed out on by dying so young, I can't help but feel sad for Gertrude on her behalf. All my love, Eleanor. August 24th, 2023. Dear Diary, today was an interesting day. I decided to take the day to clean the bedrooms in the house, ending with Freydis and Albert's old room. Freydis died in 1945 at the age of 56 after falling off of a ladder. Her skull fractured when it collided with a table on the way down. There is an old trunk in their room, and like the trunk in the attic, when I was about to leave the room, it opened. And in this particular trunk were the personal effects of Freydis. The contents were quite similar to Ingrid's. A brush and mirror, some fancy shoes, but it was the letters tucked into the fabric sidewall of the trunk that really struck a chord. When I first started reading the letters, I had thought that they might be written by Albert, Freydis' husband, as the content of the letters were quite romantic, but it wasn't long before I realized that the handwriting was distinctly female, and the name at the bottom of the letters was quite familiar. The most interesting letter is as follows. My dearest Freydis, it has been a fortnight since we last touched. Your hand brushed against mine in the hallway, and you smiled that smile that reaches your eyes and brightens your whole face. It has been 3 weeks since we last kissed, and I think of the taste of your lips often. I long for your lips and your touch. I long for the days when my husband is away on business and I can wake up next to you, watching the sunlight come through the window in the morning and hit your hair, making it shine like gold. I love you more than I can fully express, but I will spend my life trying to express it. Love, Lucy. So Lucy, resident homophobe of the Timber Estate, has been hiding that she is gay this whole time. Needless to say, I had quite the chat with this resident TERF, which started with me telling her that I had found something interesting in a trunk in Freydis and Albert's room, to which she seemed quite convinced that there was absolutely nothing of interest in Freydis and Albert's room that I could have possibly found. I promptly replied that I had found some letters that were spicy for old-time lesbian letters and quickly chastised her for treating her son like trash, especially considering that she had an affair with a woman. She admitted that she had a torrid affair with Freydis. She said that after Albert died, Freydis was so lost she could barely get out of bed, she was so heartbroken. She could see Albert and talk to him, but he was dead and she couldn't touch him. He couldn't hold her hand or kiss away her tears. She said that they were friends before, but they grew very close in the months that followed Albert's death. She then went into martyr mode and went on about how it's quite possibly all my fault that Esther is the way she is and why she was the last of the Timber line. It's all my fault. I ruined my child. She suffered for my sins. I told her that she needed to realize that her son, Edgar, is and always was a boy. Her relationship with Freydis did not turn her son into a boy. Her son was always a boy and always would be. I told her that she needed to apologize to her son for all the torment she put him through and stop dead-naming him. After this exchange, Lucy and I went to go find Edgar, and after a long conversation that took a bit of moderating, Lucy came clean to her son that her jabs at him were because of her own self-loathing, and for the first time ever, she used his proper name and pronouns. It was a day I never thought that I would see, and I am so glad that I got to see it. It's going to be a rocky road to finding acceptance and forgiveness after years of pain and suffering, but today was an excellent first step. All my love, Eleanor. August 25th, 2023. Dear Diary, today would have been Molly's 52nd birthday, but unlike Edgar, I will never get an authentic apology for all of the horrible actions that the awful monster of a woman who gave birth to me displayed. I did everything for that monster. I gave up my teens and early 20s for that woman. I gave her my time, my energy, my money, and none of it was ever enough. I gave and I gave and I gave until I couldn't give any more, yet no amount of giving was ever going to stifle her self-centered greed. I put my dreams on hold for her, to take care of her, because from the moment my father left us, she spent my entire childhood telling me it was my responsibility to take care of her now that my father was gone. She told me that it was her and me against the world, but it was really me alone against the world, while she did everything she could to keep me small and make sure that I could not succeed. I finally left and went no contact after one particularly extreme and exhausting argument where she called the cops to try to have me involuntarily committed because she didn't like that I had been attempting to set boundaries for the first time in my entire life. I couldn't take it anymore. The constant emotional abuse and control, the gaslighting and invalidation, it was all too much. So I left and never returned. I cannot express how much I hated that woman or how happy I am that she did not die on the property. I would not be able to handle having to potentially deal with that monster forever. I've been able to think of nothing all day except everything that I have given up or delayed for her. The brainwashing that I've endured, the financial abuse that I put up with, trying everything I could to be the perfect daughter, hoping and praying to the gods that I could do something, anything, that would allow that monster to love me. But she was completely incapable of loving anyone except herself. I wish my father had taken me with him when he left. I wish he had realized that she was so incapable of love that she couldn't even love the child that she carried for 9 months. I wish my life had been different, but wishing doesn't change the facts. I have gone through years of therapy, and I may never be able to fully get over the trauma that I've been through. However, every day I put one foot in front of the other and do what I can to prove that monster wrong. I will continue to do so until I feel like I have finally slayed that dragon. It doesn't matter if I write 1,000,000 scripts. It doesn't matter if I act in 1,000,000 movies. It doesn't matter if I write the next great novel. It doesn't matter if I spend my whole life taking care of the Timber Estate and its ghostly residents. One way or another, I will build myself up to the point that the pain she inflicted won't be able to reach me any longer. All my love, Eleanor. August 26th, 2023. Dear Diary, today I spent the better part of an hour talking to the next youngest ghost of the Timber Estate, Henry, who was only 16 when he died. Being a teenager is hard enough when you're alive and you can move past it, but poor Henry will be a teenager forever, and that feels like the worst fate imaginable. Unlike Gertrude, Henry is not fine with being an eternal child. Today, I found out that when Henry was alive, he had a crush on a girl his age named Florence, and that he died of the Spanish influenza before he could confess his feelings to her. As sad as I am for Gertrude for dying so young, that she missed out on so much in life, it seems to have been a blessing because at least she doesn't have to deal with the sadness that I saw in Henry's eyes today, or experience the pain that I heard in Henry's voice as he talked about not being able to confess his feelings to Florence. I know that they say it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all, but Henry doesn't seem to be a good example of that. Not knowing what his future might have held if he had not died so young haunts him in the afterlife more than he haunts the halls of the Timber Estate. Florence might have ended up being a passing fancy for Henry. He might have confessed his feelings to her and she might have politely turned him down. She might already have had a crush on someone else, but the fact of the matter is that he never got to find out, and that is still crushing him to this day. On top of all of that, he blames himself for his mother, Sarah, losing her will to live after he lost his battle with the Spanish influenza. Henry's father, David, was never the same after the death of his wife and child, and he never allowed himself to remarry and have more kids. Knowing that David died 17 years later in 1935 at the age of 51 of a heart attack, having never attempted to find happiness again, seems to really bother Henry. Until today, I thought that Edgar had been the most heartbroken ghost residing in the Timber Estate, but after my conversation with Henry today, I realized that his sorrow runs deeper than I ever expected. All my love, Eleanor. August 27th, 2023. Dear Diary, an interesting and wonderful thing happened today. Lucy, Freydis, Oliver, and Albert called a Timber Estate meeting. This was interesting on 2 fronts. The first reason being that the Timber Estate had never had a house-wide meeting like this before. The second reason being that the foursome wanted to publicly announce that they are in a polyamorous relationship together. Although they didn't know the word for that, so they used the phrase Mormon-adjacent relationship and wanted the household to recognize that where Oliver and Lucy are married, and Albert and Freydis are married, despite the vows specifically saying until death do us part, Lucy and Freydis are officially back together now that Lucy has finally accepted her son for who he is and apologized to Edgar, as well as the entire household for her awful behavior. The ghosts wanted to stress that where the women are together, Albert and Oliver are not seeing each other. The men stated that they see each other more like brothers than anything else, and therefore decided that they could not be in a relationship with each other, even though they have quote-unquote great affection for the other. It is only their wives that they are in a relationship with. At the end of the meeting, the rest of the ghosts of the household looked extremely confused, and I ended up having to give everyone a lesson on what polyamory is, and that the 4 were consensually engaging in a polyamorous lifestyle. I must say, it was not a conversation that I expected to have when I woke up this morning, but it ended up being the most interesting conversation that I've had in a long time. All of the ghosts had so many good questions, and I was never so happy to have done extensive research on polyamorous relationships for a movie I auditioned for but didn't end up getting cast in. I guess everything really does happen for a reason, because I most likely never would have been able to answer half of the questions posed if not for the research that I had done for a part that I never got. I am happy that there is finally some real peace in the Timber estate, and that Freydis, Lucy, Albert, and Oliver have come to a consensual and mature agreement about the state of their relationship. For the first time in my life, this whole house feels like a genuine home. All my love, Eleanor. August 28th, 2023. Dear Diary, today was the first day that I could bring myself to make my way into the attached greenhouse. The greenhouse was once the source of the majority of food that was consumed on the property until the monster who gave birth to me let it rot when I left 7 years ago. The ballroom, the library, and the greenhouse were the 3 rooms of the house that kept me sane when I was going through the worst of the abuse that monster put me through. I remember one time I had attempted the kind of humor that Molly loved to use. I thought that if I did something that she was known for, she would think me quite clever, and then maybe she would love me. But I screwed up by aiming her humor directly at her. I don't remember what I said, but I remember I delivered the same kind of biting backhanded joke that Molly loved to quip, and then the next thing I know, I'm crying into Grandma Sophia's arms as Molly is screaming at me, and then she storms off and refused to speak to me for an entire week, acting as if I didn't exist at all. I spent that week tending the plants in the greenhouse. She wouldn't even look at me once that whole week. She was so convinced that I said whatever I said to hurt her, and not because I thought I was being funny like Mommy. I never tried to be funny in any way, ever again. I was quite surprised to see Ingrid and Eric when I walked into the greenhouse. I had been wondering where on the grounds they had been hiding, as I had only caught glimpses of them in passing a few times since I got back to the Timber estate. Since Ingrid was there, I told her that I found her spell book and asked her about it. She said that it was just her personal spell book and that I would have to finish transcribing it to see if there was anything in there that would answer my questions, as the journey is more important than the destination. Great-great-great-grandmothers, am I right? Both Ingrid and Eric died in the winter of 1922. Ingrid was 60 and Eric was 63. The couple was found cuddled up together in their bed, the victims of carbon monoxide poisoning. After their death, a number of renovations were made on the house to try and prevent such a tragedy from ever happening again, and Eric and Ingrid's things were brought up to the attic for safekeeping. I spent a few hours trying to clean up the greenhouse, and after, the whole place was cleaned and ready for a new set of plants. I went back to Ingrid's spellbook to keep transcribing it from the Elder Futhark to the modern Latin alphabet. Hopefully I will be done with it soon. I am just so grateful that she wrote everything down in English and not Old Norse. Otherwise, it would probably take years for me to translate the spellbook, as I had never learned Old Norse. All my love, Eleanor. August 29th, 2023. Dear Diary, I spent my day with Edgar. The more I learn about Edgar, the more I like him and wish I knew him when he was alive. There was a lot that Edgar put in his diary, like the way he felt in trousers, his love for being able to go out in public as himself, reading, cars, and rifles. However, it was the things that he didn't put in his diary that I was the most interested in. We talked for hours, and the more I talked with him, the more I admired his confidence and his cheeky personality. There's something about his smile that lights up an entire room and makes a person feel safe and special. Edgar had a lot of questions for me. He asked about how trans people like him were seen now in my time. He said it was something that he had been wanting to ask for a while, but was scared of what I would say. And I was so sad to have to tell him about the Don't Say Gay bills and anti-trans laws that have crept up all over the country in the last few years. I did inform him that our state of Washington had made laws that protect trans youth and people in our community, which did make him feel so much better, but also very sad for the people in states that are actively taking away queer rights. Edgar was quite surprised that queer is a word that many of us have reclaimed and are using for ourselves. However, he liked the term alphabet mafia the best, despite the negative connotation with the word mafia from his time. I told him about Roe v. Wade and how it had been overturned. I told him about Stonewall, pride parades, and the different pride flags. He was so excited to know that there was a flag just for trans people. I told him how I'm able to live as an openly bisexual actress, that I still get hate for it, especially from the super holy roller Christian types, but for the most part, I get to live my life being exactly who I am. He told me what it was like living out in his time and about how the status of his family was what had allowed him the privilege of being able to be himself in his time. Even if that privilege did not extend to him being allowed to breathe past 33, having the opportunity to live as his true self when so many people had to live in the underground world of the gay scene of his time made him feel extremely blessed. It was such an overall positive conversation that I didn't have the heart to tell him about Project 2025. All my love, Eleanor. August 30th, 2023. Dear Diary, it took me longer than I expected, but I finally finished transcribing Ingrid's spellbook today, just in time for the full moon. Ingrid had a lot of fantastic theories towards the back of her spellbook, like the theory that Ragnarok has already happened and that the Christian god that the Timber family worships is just our trickster god, Loki. The passage that I had been looking for that would explain everything that's going on in this estate was one of the very last things written in the spellbook, because of course it was. And it is as follows. Pestilence property warding spell. 4 apples, clove, cinnamon, candle, knife, shovel. Cut the apples in half in a way that you can see the seeds that look like a star in the middle. Crush and mix cloves and cinnamon together using a mortar and pestle. Sprinkle on both halves of the apples. Put the 2 halves of the apples back. Light the candle and use the wax to seal the apples back together, saying, Idun, keeper of the golden apples, goddess of my people, I call on you in this time of pestilence to keep those on this property shrouded from death. You who keep the gods youthful, I ask to keep those on this property among the living. While the wax binds the apples back together, as well as while burying each apple on the 4 corners outside of the property. May the gods help us make it through this awful illness. My theory is that when Ingrid used the phrases shrouded from death in conjunctions with keep those on this property among the living, instead of stopping the occupants from dying on the property, which is what she was hoping to accomplish as she was watching the Spanish influenza spread through her friends and family, instead it literally made it so that anyone who was on the property was shielded from being collected by whichever deity or being they would have been collected by to be brought to their afterlife. In trying to help ease the suffering of her friends and family, she accidentally tied anyone who died on the property to the property forever, shielding them from whatever afterlife they might have had if she hadn't performed the spell. Of course, this is just a theory, and there's no way to know for sure if I would have the ability to undo what's been done. With the invocation of Eden, it's hard to say if I can ultimately do anything that would allow the ghosts to move on, but I feel as though I owe it to them to find a way to make their afterlife here on the Timber Estate more pleasant for them somehow. All my love, Eleanor. August 31st, 2023. Dear Diary, I talked with Ingrid today, hoping that the 2 of us could put our heads together and figure out a way to make things better for the ghosts. She's quite certain that her spell is why they are all here, and that there's no way to undo what she's done. She admits that she shouldn't have been so careless with her word choice, but at the time she was so desperate and wanted to do something, anything, to protect her friends and family. We figured out that the best way to help make things better for the ghosts is if we could figure out a way to help them be able to interact with the objects more easily. At the moment, the only objects that they can easily interact with are the objects that they were buried with. Gertrude can interact with dolls because she was buried with one. James can carry around his tobacco pipe because he was buried with it, and so on and so forth. So now we're trying to test theories as to how we can make things more accessible to the ghosts. My first theory was to go back to the little graveyard behind the house where everyone is buried, everyone except Molly, of course, and take a small amount of dirt and sprinkle it onto objects and see if that would help them pick it up. I figured that if they could interact with the types of objects they were buried with, that maybe the dirt might be the key. We tested this theory with a plate and a few small objects that could be easily cleaned, but not a single ghost could pick up the plate or any of the other objects. When that didn't work, my next thought was maybe I need to bury the objects in the graveyard. So I took a different plate and buried it in the graveyard, and then had the ghost try and pick up the plate that still had the graveyard dirt on it, but that didn't work either. So for the next few hours, I tried digging deeper and deeper into the earth until I had dug 6 feet down, wondering if that would make a difference. But 1 foot or 6 feet, it didn't matter. Not a single ghost could easily lift the plate. Sure, if they concentrated hard enough, they could move it a little, but not like the objects they were buried with. Feeling defeated, we put our heads together and tried to think of something else, but when nobody could come up with any other ideas, we decided to call it a day. We will try something new tomorrow. All my love, Eleanor. September 1st, 2023. Dear Diary. Today, while I was thumbing through books and searching the internet trying to figure out something, anything that could help the ghosts of Timber Estate, another book fell from one of the shelves in the library, the same way that Edgar's diary fell from the shelf that held all of the Jane Austen novels. Only this book was the complete collection of short stories by Edgar Allan Poe, and the story that it had opened up to was the 1843 classic, The Telltale Heart. The story is about a man who murders an old man he is supposed to be taking care of and buries his body under the floorboards. The man is only caught because his own guilt causes him to hear the beating of the dead man's heart. It's an amazing story that I absolutely love, but I don't understand how it has anything to do with the ghosts or how it's going to help them have a better afterlife here on the Timber Estate. Maybe it has some clue as to who murdered Edgar, since Edgar does happen to share the same first name as the author. However, I don't see how solving Edgar's murder is going to help make all of the ghosts of Timber Estate have a better afterlife. If I'm going to be honest, I don't know how it would even make Edgar's afterlife better. Even if we could find Edgar's murderer, he's probably long dead by now, so it's not like there can be any real justice for Edgar in that regard. I have so many questions and absolutely no answers. All my love, Eleanor. September 2nd, 2023. Dear Diary. Another book fell from a shelf in the library today, only this one was A Study in Scarlet, a Sherlock Holmes book by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, one of the many stories of Detective Sherlock Holmes that my father used to read to me before he left us. I don't know what to think about this. Is this supposed to be some sort of clue as to why my father left us? I can't imagine that there would be clues on how to make things better for the ghosts of the Timber Estate in the pages of this tattered old copy of a detective story. I wish whatever ghost was pulling these books down would just fess up already and tell me what it is they're trying to tell me. It is not like the whole lot of them haven't been talking to me directly over the last few days, so why is one of them sending me on side quests when they are all here directly talking to me already? This is so infuriating, and it is honestly weird because what does a short story by Edgar Allan Poe and a whole book by Arthur Conan Doyle have in common? How are either of these stories supposed to help the ghosts of the Timber Estate? I spent the rest of my day in the kitchen with Grandma Sophia trying to piece it together. I baked oatmeal cookies and we chatted, but no matter how long we talked and tried to work it all out, neither of us could figure out what the two stories had in common besides murder. I am just so frustrated right now. All of my love, Eleanor. September 3rd, 2023. Dear Diary. Today was another frustrating day of another book falling from a shelf in the library. This one was The Complete Grimm's Fairy Tales by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, another book that my father used to read to me before he left us. The book was open to the story of Cinderella, the story that I loved most as a child, the story that I made my father read to me over and over again, the story of a motherless girl who loves her father very much. Her father decides to marry a woman he thinks is nice so that Cinderella will have a stepmother and stepsisters, only all of them are wicked and force Cinderella to do all of the housework. Despite her hardships, Cinderella stays kind. Her father goes to the fair, and where her new stepsisters ask for dresses and jewels, Cinderella asks for the first branch that brushes against his hat on the way home. She plants the branch on her mother's grave, visiting 3 times each day and crying. When she's not allowed to go to the king's festival, she makes a wish at her mother's graves for a dress and slippers, and the rest is history. I remember I would always hide under the covers when my father would get to the part about the stepsisters cutting off parts of their feet to fit into Cinderella's little slipper, and the part where they were blinded by pigeons. Every time, he would laugh at my cowering under the covers and put his arm around my shoulder. I loved this story so much for so many reasons, but the biggest reason was never written into the story. The reason that I loved the story of Cinderella so much is the potential good that Cinderella could do with her happily ever after. I used to lay awake as a child, freshly tucked into bed, thinking about all of the people in Cinderella's kingdom that she would now have the power to help, before finally drifting off to sleep and dreaming about all the things that the rags to riches princess would be doing to be the voice of the people, her people, in this enchanting made-up story about a faraway land. Her story gave me hope that one day I could go from a common person to a princess that got to make things better for other common people. I can't help but think that this has to have something to do with my father, but what do all of these stories have to do with the man who left me when I was a child, and why is this more important than helping the ghosts? He never read the Edgar Allan Poe short stories collection to me, but he read the other 2 books to me. What is the common denominator here? I feel like I'm going crazy. None of this makes sense. Every single ghost is accounted for, and they all have been talking to me about what options there might be to make things better, but nobody wants to fess up to pulling books from the shelves. I hope whoever is doing this is enjoying their practical joke, because if insanity creeps in due to all these random falling books, they aren't going to have anyone that is going to be able to help them make things better for their afterlife. All my love, Eleanor. September 4th, 2023. Dear Diary, today, I took a break from the library and I sat and talked with Alice and her husband, Thomas. I realized that I hadn't really checked in on Alice since her parents, Lucy and Oliver, had made their big announcement, and I thought it might be a good idea to see how she was doing since the news. It seemed like a better idea than going to the library to end up finding another book on the ground left open to another story that I can't understand the importance of. Alice died of kidney failure in 1986 at the age of 72, and her husband Thomas died 2 years later at the age of 75 of lung cancer. The happy couple spent their whole lives loving each other and taking care of the timber estate and their only child, my grandma Sophia. Alice insisted that she was completely fine with her parents' polyamorous relationship, and that she was completely happy that everything was now finally out in the open and there were no more secrets. I chatted with her for quite a while just to make sure that she wasn't just saying that because she didn't want to talk about the subject in particular, but she genuinely seemed quite happy for everyone involved. I feel like I should spend more time with Great-Grandma Alice. She really is quite an extraordinary individual. She's very well spoken and so kind. It makes me feel bad that I ignored the ghosts out of my own desire for self-preservation, and it makes me even more angry with Molly for making the household so hostile that I felt like I shouldn't connect with its ghostly inhabitants. The ghosts are my family, and I shut them out because Molly didn't like them. Looking back, she probably didn't like them because she couldn't control them. All my love, Eleanor. September 5th, 2023. Dear Diary, today was another frustrating book on the floor of the library day. Today's book was the complete works of William Shakespeare, and it was open to A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is a play where there are several subplots revolving around the wedding of Theseus and Hippolyta. It is one of my favorite plays. So much about the play is things not being seen exactly as they are. Of course, a lot of that is in due part to the flower juice that Puck rubs into the eyes of several of the characters. All of this leads me to wonder if what I am missing is something that I am not seeing clearly and or not seeing for what it is. All of this leads me to frustration because I have no clue what detail I'm missing that could be helpful to the ghosts, nor why they feel the need to leave clues by dropping books instead of talking to me like they already are. All my love, Eleanor. September 6th, 2023. Dear Diary, I am honestly going to scream. Today's book on the floor of the library was Alexander Dumas' The Count of Monte Cristo, which is a story about imprisonment and revenge. In the story, Edmund is wrongly imprisoned for treason without a trial. He learns about a treasure from another prisoner. After the prisoner dies, Edmund escapes, finds the treasure, and takes on the persona of the Count of Monte Cristo in order to gain access to the Parisian court to take his long-awaited revenge. It is an amazing and interesting story, and yet again, I have no idea what it has to do with the ghosts of Timber Estate or how it could possibly help them. The only ghost that could even remotely want revenge for what has happened to him would be Edgar, and yet even after asking him again today if he is the one making the books fall, he has stated, yet again, that it is not him, and that even if it was, he has no need of revenge. The man who killed him is more than likely already very dead, and if the man had any children, it is not their fault that their father was an awful, hateful human being. Edgar said he came to grips with his death a long time ago and is just happy that he got to live his life as himself before he died and that he got to be buried as himself in death despite Lucy trying to make it otherwise. He said he was lucky that Alice and Thomas were there to stop Lucy from putting his dead name on the headstone and being buried in women's clothing. That was all that mattered to him now. All my love, Eleanor. September 7th, 2023. Dear Diary, today's book on the floor was Alice's Adventure in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. It was opened to Chapter 8, The Queen's Croquet Ground. The famous chapter where the Queen of Hearts orders all of the white roses to be painted red. I remember the first time that my father read me the story, I said that the Queen of Hearts sounded a lot like Mommy, and he cautioned me to never say that when she was around. Everything about this story screams the monster who gave birth to me, and yet I don't understand how the monster who gave birth to me has anything to do with helping the ghosts now. It is fitting that this story is one to fall off the shelf at this time because I officially feel completely insane. Not a single one of these stories has anything in them to help the ghosts, and yet these are the clues that I am being given. Why? Why am I getting clues that have nothing to do with helping the ghosts? And what do they mean? If one of the ghosts is trying to tell me something, why are they giving me clues instead of just saying what it is they have to say? As Alice would say, this is all getting curiouser and curiouser. All my love, Eleanor. September 8th, 2023. Dear Diary. Today, the complete Grimm's Fairy Tales by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm was back on the floor, only this time it was open to the story of the Little Briar Rose, the Grimm's brothers' version of the Sleeping Beauty story. At this point, this has to be just one giant joke, because how does the story of a girl who is cursed to prick herself with a spindle and fall over dead on her 15th birthday, who is then kissed by a prince 100 years later, who wants to prove he is not afraid and who wants to see Little Briar Rose for himself, be anything that could help the ghost in any way? With each passing day, I get more and more confused as to how I am supposed to help and what these clues really mean. I am not ashamed to admit that I screamed at the top of my lungs to stop messing around and just tell me what is wanted of me, but nobody showed up to say anything. I am so over these little clues. I just want whoever knows whatever to speak up and let's figure this out together. Maybe one of the ghosts knows that there's nothing that I can do to help them, so they're just messing with me until I go completely insane and realize that the whole thing is hopeless, that helping them is a fairy tale? I don't know what to do. I want to help. I want to make things better for these ghosts, but is there really anything that I can do when I can't even figure out why one of the ghosts is leaving me clues? First, it was Edgar's diary, then Ingrid's spell book, then those letters from Lucy. Now all of these books, I just don't get it. What does any of this have in common? What does it all mean? All my love, Eleanor. September 9th, 2023. Dear Diary. This time it wasn't a book on the floor of the library. It was the note that my father had left when he left us, only this note was longer. It read as follows. Dear Eleanor, I love you more than words can say, but I need to leave. I need to find family and community somewhere else, somewhere that doesn't include your mother. You will always be my shining light. I will be back for you as soon as I can find a safe home for us. Until then, I know that your Grandma Sophia will keep you safe. Love you so much, Daddy. I have never been so confused. This is not the note that I have kept in my jewelry box and cried over for the last 20 years. This has to be some cruel joke. How can it not be? But if this is the whole note, why did I receive only the partial note? Did my father write this note and then change his mind? So he wrote the other one that I got? If he did change his mind, why? Was there something that I did to make him stop loving me? He used to read to me every night. He told me all the time that he loved me. And although I spent my entire childhood being told by Molly that he never really loved us, I can't help but wonder if that was just another one of her vicious and vile lies. Molly was always excellent at forging signatures. She used to forge mine all the time. What if she forged the smaller letter to give to me and hid this one? What if this was the letter I was supposed to get this whole time? But if that is the truth, why did my father never return to the timber estate to come and get me and take me away from that horrible woman? Why did he never call or write or get in contact with me in some other way? It would have been so easy for him to reach out. Not a single ghost will fess up to being the one to leave the clues. Nobody would tell me what this means or why they are showing me these things now and not 20 years ago. I feel so alone. All my love, Eleanor. September 10th, 2023. Dear Diary, today I needed a break from all the clues, so I went to the nursery to play pretend with Gertrude, Emma, and Thornstein. I figured that would help me clear my head like it had before. However, my brain has just been so preoccupied with everything going on that after an hour, I excused myself from the nursery, stating that it was just about lunchtime and I needed to get something to eat. I thanked everyone for a lovely time and put down the dolls. I went to the kitchen to go find Grandma Sophia. I made another batch of oatmeal cookies thinking it might help, but that didn't cheer me up or quiet my mind either. So after a quick chat with Grandma Sophia, I decided to go to the ballroom. In the ballroom, I danced around, hoping that would make the difference, that maybe the movement would be enough to make me feel better about the last clue that I was given, but it did nothing to help. I ended up sitting in the middle of the ballroom floor sobbing. After a while, Edgar showed up and made a few attempts at making me feel better, but all of the attempts were wasted on me. He tried for over an hour before he realized there was nothing he could do. I still don't know which ghost is giving me these clues or why they are giving them to me. I just want answers. However, I fear I will never get them. All my love, Eleanor. September 11th, 2023. Dear Diary, today I decided it was time to go into Molly's bedroom. It was the first time that I had stepped into that room since I left the estate 7 years ago, and I came across something truly disturbing in her jewelry box. In the bottom of the box, under the pearls that have been worn by 6 generations of Berger women on their wedding days, was a picture of me, my father, and her. Only in the picture, my father's face was scratched out and the word die was written in all capitals in red marker. I am glad that I had been so terrified as a child that I never went into her room while she was not in it and went through her things like a lot of children do. I would not have wanted to see this as a child. I honestly didn't want to see it today. I put everything, including the picture, back in the box and left. I knew that my mother had lost interest in my father years before he left and that she absolutely hated him for leaving us, but I didn't realize that she hated him enough to scratch out his face and write die over the remnants of the photo. Maybe that is why my father never reached out to me after he left us. Maybe Molly threatened to kill him if he ever tried to contact me. Maybe if he knew that she was dead, he would finally show up and be a part of my life. Or maybe Molly was right all along and he never really loved us. All my love, Eleanor. September 12th, 2023. Dear Diary, I was so depressed today that I couldn't get out of bed. I spent quite a few hours searching the internet, trying to find my father on social media, hoping that if he was out there that I would find him. But no matter how many search engines I put his name into, there is just no record of Tyler Darnell past 2002. If my father changed his name, there's no legal record of it. I wouldn't blame him. It would be the best way to make sure that Molly couldn't find him. However, that also means that I have no way of finding him. After a few hours of not getting out of bed, Edgar came to find me and eventually convinced me that I needed to, at the very least, eat something. He quipped that he would get it for me, but seeing as he can't actually grab onto anything for that long, he figured he would just remind me to eat something. I reluctantly got out of bed and made my way to the kitchen. There, Grandma Sophia decided it was her time to take over trying to cheer me up. I love them both so much. I don't know what I would do without them. All my love, Eleanor. September 13th, 2023. Dear Diary, today I awoke to a shovel laying across my bed. I have no idea why a shovel would be laying across my bed, but there it was, just laying there across my purple comforter. It filled my blankets with its dried dirts and bits of dried grass. It looked old, like the shovel that we used to have when I was a child before Molly got a new shovel with one of those foam handle grips. Maybe this was the same shovel from my childhood? If it is, where has it been this whole time? I stripped the blankets and sheets from the bed and took them to the laundry room to wash them. After starting the load, I turned around to see that the shovel had made it on its own from my bedroom to the laundry room and was now leaning against the door frame. Apparently, there's something important about this shovel for one of the ghosts to move it from my bedroom all the way to the laundry room. That couldn't have been an easy task. However, I have no idea what it means or why it is now showing up in every room that I walk into if I don't take it with me. I must admit that this has been the most curious clue yet. All my love, Eleanor. September 14th, 2023. Dear Diary, today I got answers, and I got a lot of them. Honestly, there is so much to write down, and I don't particularly know where to start. I guess I should start with, I woke up this morning thinking there would be more clues that made me more confused than gave me answers. However, that wasn't the case. There, laying next to the shovel, was a diary, opened up to the date that my father left us. It didn't take me long to realize that the diary was one of Molly's, and the entry read as follows. Dear Diary, today my husband tried to leave me. Can you believe it? He tried to leave me? It's ridiculous. I am not to be left. If anyone is going to do the leaving, it's going to be me. But it's no matter. I caught him trying to leave a note for Eleanor, and I ripped it out of his hands, and I pulled him into the greenhouse to talk it out. Little did he know, I brought him in there so I could hit him over the head with a shovel and drag him off the property to kill him. I was careful to make sure that there was no way that he would die on the property. I dug a hole outside of the property line by that ridiculous gnome statue that Tyler just had to have because Eleanor thought it was so cute, and I buried him in it. I bashed his face in until I knew he was dead, and I covered him with dirt. As soon as I was done, I copied his note with a few omissions, and I left it out for Eleanor. There was no way that I was going to let that man leave me and take Eleanor with him. That child is going to be my golden goose one day. I need someone to take care of me when I'm old. And now that I am just so heartbroken over my husband's leaving, I will have every excuse to make sure that Eleanor is always around to take care of me. To think all this time I've been looking for a new husband to take care of me so that I didn't have to lift a finger to do anything when I could have just gotten rid of Tyler years ago. Eleanor will be so sad and she will feel so sorry for me. This is going to work completely in my favor. I just know it. Molly, that monster, that horrible woman killed my father and told me he never loved me and that he left us when that was never the case. I grabbed the shovel and I walked out to the gnome and I started digging. After only 15 minutes of digging, I found his bones in a shallow grave. When I turned around, my father was there smiling at me. I was completely confused until he said that Molly had hit him so hard with the shovel that he was brain dead before he made it into the shallow grave. That his heart was still going and still breathing when he went in, but he was already dead before she smashed his face in with the shovel and covered his body in dirt. He also explained that Ingrid had buried the apples a little further than the property line, which explained the 4 strong apple trees just outside the property line. So even if he hadn't been brain dead already, he still would have been within the boundaries of the spell. I was so happy, but then I was angry. Why had he never shown himself? Why wait until now? He explained that he never shown himself because of Molly. He also explained that he was the reason that Molly was dead. He had overheard her talking on the phone to one of her friends, telling her that she was going to get in the car and go to the picket line and grab Eleanor and bring her back here, all because she thought she had a right to me. So my father cut her brakes, causing her car accident. He said he hadn't intended to kill her, just to make it harder for her to get to me, but he wasn't sorry that she was dead. I asked him why he hadn't shown himself after I came back. Why the clues and what did they all mean? He said he thought that if he showed himself right off the bat that I would be too overwhelmed and that I wouldn't want to hear him out. He wasn't wrong. I probably would not have wanted anything to do with him. I would probably be so mad that I would never consider talking to him. He went on to explain each one of the book clues in depth. The telltale heart was supposed to be a clue that he had been murdered. A study in scarlet was supposed to be a clue that the telltale heart was a clue about him being murdered. Cinderella was a clue trying to let me know that he had always loved me and that he had been trying to do what he thought was right for me. As far as A Midsummer Night's Dream goes, I got that right. It was about everything not being what it seemed. However, he was trying to specifically tell me that everything with Molly wasn't as it had seemed. The Count of Monte Cristo was a clue that he had gotten his revenge after years of the imprisonment of isolation from everyone because of his fear of what Molly would do. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was a clue about Molly being the one who murdered him, as he remembered telling me not to tell her about thinking she was like the Queen of Hearts. The last clue, however, he said was actually a clue to help all the ghosts. I was very confused when he said that the last clue was a clue to help the ghosts, and I said as much. He looked at me very disappointed. In the fairy tales, what breaks the spell? He asked as if it was completely obvious, to which I replied, some prince forces his men to walk around with a glass coffin until an apple dislodges from the half-dead princess, or he kisses the princess without her consent. He didn't seem to find this funny. He very seriously replied, a kiss of true love. I let him know that there has been plenty of true love kissing going on around this estate over the years, and that I was pretty sure if that was the case, that the spell would have been broken by now. He informed me that it had to be a kiss between the living and the dead. Little Briar Rose is dead. The prince kisses her and wakes her and the rest of the kingdom from their deadly slumber. The person in the land of the living has to kiss the person that is dead to bring them back. I thought this was a pretty weak idea considering that this is real life and not a fairy tale. The thought that the act of true love's kiss could somehow help the ghosts of the Timber Estate seemed pretty outrageous, but my father seemed pretty convinced that it would work. In Little Briar Rose, our sleeping beauty is dead for 100 years, but the spell somehow makes it so that she still has a body that isn't decomposed in the ground. She is not a ghost. So I asked my father how a living person is supposed to kiss a ghost and bring them back to life. He countered my question with a question of his own, which was, have I ever just tried? I got completely confused and asked why me. He said that I was the one in love with Edgar, so I might as well try and kiss him. I tried to argue this, to say that Edgar and I are just friends, but my father shot it down. He said that he's seen the way that we look at each other, and he prompted me to go to him and give it a try. I felt silly going to Edgar and confessing to him that I have feelings for him. Edgar had barely spoken to me before a few weeks ago. However, when I did, he expressed that he had feelings for me too. I leaned in to kiss him, expecting that our lips wouldn't meet and that I would just go completely through him, but to our surprise, he was solid. Not only was Edgar solid, but so were all of the ghosts in Timber Estate. As ridiculous as it sounds, a kiss of true love brought all of the ghosts of the Timber Estate back to life. The first thing that the newly living occupants of the Timber Estate did was try to leave the property, which, much to their delight, they do have the ability to do. I don't know what this means for any of us, but I know that everyone in the Timber Estate is getting a second chance at life. All of this means that I'm going to be spending a lot of time explaining a lot of things to a lot of newly living people. I'm also going to have to try to figure out how I'm going to get documentation for people who have been dead and are now newly alive. There isn't exactly an instruction manual on how to get a driver's license for a person with a birth certificate from the 1800s and a death certificate in the 1900s and are now alive again. I guess we're going to figure it out together one day at a time. All my love, Eleanor. September 15th, 2023. Dear Diary, it's been a month since I found out that the monster that gave birth to me died, and my life has changed so much. I've learned so many secrets that have been hidden for so long. I have found true love and an amazing family. My father is back in my life. I have so much to be grateful for. I have so much that I thought I would never have. Things that I thought I did not deserve, but now know I always did. I may not be on the picket line with the rest of the actors and writers. I might never be on a set ever again, but I have a life of my own, which is the thing that I have been trying to find my whole life. I don't know what the next month of my life is going to look like or what new challenges I am going to face now that the ghosts of the Timber Estate are no longer ghosts. but I know that we will face it together as a community that loves and cares about each other. The Timber Estate will be in the hands of the Timber family once again. One day, I will become a Timber myself. I am loved and I deserve love. I am happy and I deserve happiness. I love who I am and I deserve to be who I am. I love my life. All my love, Eleanor. For more content from Candace Clorinda, grab a copy of After 2024, The Diary of Jade.
Hi there, my name is Candace Clorinda. I go by I Love Sesroom on social media, and I am the author of the story that you just listened to. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, I hope you'll check out the links in my link tree down below. You'll be able to find a copy of the story that you just listened to for purchase. You'll also be able to find many other ways to support me. Big shout out and thank you to my reader who has helped my sanity more than they will ever know. Thank you. I really hope you enjoyed.
I'd spent most of my life pretending that I didn't see the ghosts, that I couldn't hear them, that they were not there, and that they had never been there. The second reason being the foursome wanted to publicly announce that they are in a polyamorous relationship together, although they didn't know the word for that, so they used the phrase. Oh my God. Okay, hold on. That was really funny. I have to reread that. I was taken off. I was so taken off guard by that. Okay. The second reason being the foursome wanted to publicly announce that they are in a polyamorous, But if this whole note, Odin, stop. Hey, no, be quiet. Stop. Be quiet. I don't need you growling in the background of this. Is that the shovel she fucking buried him in after she killed him? My God. Ow, I hit my elbow. I just want to let you know that as I'm recording this, when I was reading earlier the clues and stuff, I had predicted this ending. I like this story. Okay.